Welcome to EPG Pathasala. I am Professor V. Kannan, former Pro Vice Chancellor and presently a mathematics professor at the University of Hyderabad. Today's course title is Vedic, Epic, Puranic Culture of India. The module will be on Vedic culture, society and rituals. In this module, we will see the culture called Vedic culture, which was there before 3500 years in the Indian subcontinent and in its nearby places. Vedic culture by itself is defined as the culture which was there in some millennia before 1500 BC and for which the chief source of information is the Vedic literature. Today we will see on the following points. Introduction to Vedic Age, geographical extent of Vedic civilization, people of Vedic civilization, social life in Vedic period, family, household and lifestyle, class system in Vedic period, religion in Vedic society, Vedic gods and religion, polity and social structure, economy of the early Vedic age, and finally the conclusion. Now we start with the first item, introduction to Vedic age. What is the Vedic age? It is the age between 7000 BC and 600 BC roughly, and the culture that existed during this Vedic age in northern India and its western extensions, that is known as Vedic culture. Here we find three items. First, the period, next the geographic extent, and thirdly the source of information. The period should be before 600 BC and it can extend to several millennia. The area, geographic region should be northern India and its western extensions including Afghanistan, etc. And the chief source of information should be the Vedic literature. The culture exhibited in this period, in this region and known through this source of information will be known as Vedic culture. It has been broadly classified into two parts. The culture of the Rigvedic period is one, and the culture of the later Vedic period is another. This division, this classification is also based on the same three ingredients. First, there is a time difference. Rigvedic period is much earlier than the later Vedic period. Second, there is a regional difference. During the Rigvedic period, the region covered was northern India and western parts of the Indian subcontinent, but in later Vedic period, the region was extended to the Vindhya region and also the parts of South India. Thirdly, the source of information, also there is a difference. In the first, we have only one source, namely Rigveda, whereas in the second later Vedic period, there is an entire Vedic literature consisting of Vedas, Vedangas, Upavedas, etc. Now, a word about a technical term, Aryan. It is a word frequently occurring in the Vedas, very frequently in the Rigveda, and it occurs as an adjective very often. This adjective means one having noble values and culture. But even though it occurs mostly as an adjective, some historians have interpreted it as a linguistic term indicating a speech group of Indo-European origin. They have interpreted that Aryans form a fabric of the society. They have interpreted that their language belongs to the Indo-European group, namely the archaic Sanskrit of Veda belongs to that language group. According to one theory, Aryans were resisted by the dark-skinned local people called the Sioux. And according to that theory, the local people were overpowered by the Aryans because the Aryans were having better weapons and horse-driven chariots. But later researchers have refuted this theory, and this refutation is based on archaeological findings, satellite pictures, etc. The satellite pictures of Saraswati river suggest that the river was flowing in the region as claimed by the traditionalists within the Indian subcontinent, and therefore the theory that the Rig Veda, which describes the flow of Saraswati so often, was composed in a place outside India, that theory gets refuted. Similarly, some archaeological findings are also in favor of the Vedic people being really the local indigenous people of the land. They were living in harmony with their surroundings. They did not come from elsewhere. Their society had a diversity. There were different layers of contributions. Instead of layers, we can say that there were in that society different components of contributions. In any society, there will be attempts to subdue the antisocial elements. The antisocial elements referred to in the Vedas are called the Sioux. They were to be subdued by the more civilized components of the society. It is debatable, and the debate still continues, whether the Indus Valley people were also a part of the Vedic people or not. There is one feature that distinguishes them. Unlike the Indus Valley people, the Vedic people lived in thatched houses, they lived in rural areas, whereas in Indus Valley there was an urban culture, and these people depended extensively on cow and horse. We may think that the ancestors of Indus Valley people would have also done so, but still this seems to be a major difference between the two cultures, the culture exhibited in the Indus Valley civilization and the culture described in Vedas. People were divided into 4 varnas during the Vedic period. These varnas were called Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, and we are going to learn a little more about them later. The Vedic people believed that gods would be pleased with religious sacrifices called yajnas. In fact, Vedas are full of prayogas, descriptions of yajnas. There is even a saying that Veda hi yajnartham abhipravrittaha, which would mean that the main purpose of the Vedic literature is the performance of Vedic sacrifices. These sacrifices were conducted by priests. They, the Vedic people, personified forces of nature. They worshipped them as Vayu, Maruts, Indra, Varuna, Surya, Agni, Prithvi, Aranyani, etc., where nowadays we will call them as forces of nature as air, storm, rains, mountains, earth, and so on. But for each one of them, Vedic people attached a deity. Now there is a quote. This quote is from a French Orientalist. His name is Sylvain Levy. He says, "The multiplicity of the manifestations of the Indian genius, as well as their fundamental unity." There is multiplicity as well as unity. There is a unity in diversity. This gives India the right to figure on the first rank in the history of civilized nations. Her civilization, spontaneous and original, unrolls itself in a continuous time across at least 30 centuries without interruption, without deviation. What Livy appreciates about Indian culture is first its antiquity and next its continuity. It is a very old culture at the same time. For 3000 years or even more, it has continued in the same fashion. Another thing that he appreciates is the unity in diversity. Fundamentally, there is unity. At the same time, there is diversity in the society itself. Now we go to the second part, geographical extent of Vedic civilization. If you see this picture, you will understand that this region described in the Vedas comprised of Afghanistan, North India and stopped up to the Vindhyas. In the Rigvedic period, early Vedic settlements were in the Sapta Sindhu region. Sapta Sindhu means land of 7 rivers. These rivers are nowadays called Sindhu, Satluj, etc. This corresponds to the region occupied by modern East Afghanistan, Punjab and fringes means frontiers of western UP. Possibly, these people did not know the land beyond Yamuna. Himalayas were mentioned, but there was no mention of the Vindhyas. Ganges, the river Ganga, was mentioned only once in a hymn of Rig Veda, whereas the river Saraswati was mentioned very often. This is one side of the story. But on the other hand, the Vedas very frequently talk about samudras or oceans. Samudras are an important component of Rigveda also. Samudra means sea or ocean even in today's vocabulary. But some historians who wanted to establish the theory that Aryans came from some other area where there were no samudras, they wanted to interpret the word samudra as just a large water body. But granting the continuity of the meaning of the word samudra in Rigveda and other Vedas, samudra cannot be interpreted otherwise, because in other Vedas, samudras are talked as a place with water that is salty and also a place where several ships are floating, and also a place, ambas yapare, a place where the other coast, the other side is not visible. Therefore, it is fair to say that the geographical extent of the Vedic civilization was much larger than what is usually indicated. But there is a contrast with the later Vedic period. In the later Vedic period, people occupied Ganga, Yamuna, Doab, that is the land between these two rivers, and they later spread themselves in the entire Gangetic plain and also penetrated into the Deccan, Vindhyas, and the two seas on the east and west were mentioned in later Vedic period. There is one more thing to observe. We are thinking that the geography of Vedic civilization is limited to Indian subcontinent or to its outskirts. But actually, Veda belongs to the entire world. As a philosopher, Henry David Thoreau would impress upon us, in the great teaching of the Vedas, there is no touch of sectarianism. It is of all ages, all climes, and all nationalities, and it is the royal road for the attainment of the great knowledge. Viewed in this way, there are no geographical boundaries for the region of Vedic civilization. We come to the third part. This is about the people of Vedic civilization. In the Rig Vedic period, how the society was described in Rig Veda has been interpreted in many ways. Some historians have portrayed the Vedic society as that of tribes under the rule of a tribal monarchy. But the highly developed civilization described in the Vedas gives room for a contrary theory. They were of civilized people. For instance, the king was assisted and advised by assemblies like Sabha, Samiti, and Vidhata. The important officials were the Purohita, that is the priest, Senapati, that is the commander, etc. However, the Rig Vedic society differed from the later Vedic society in 4 or 5 different ways. Wars known as Gavashti were fought for cows and not for territory in the early Vedic period. The word Janapada, which comes in the later Vedic literature to refer to a kingdom in a definite area, was not at all mentioned even once in the Rig Veda. However, the word Jana, which may mean tribe or public, that was mentioned quite often in Rig Veda. This is one major difference between the society of the Rig Veda and society of the later Vedas. In the Rig Veda, the king Rajan had no standing army, whereas in the period of Yajurveda, etc., Rajas were having several standing armies. The Rig Veda period, the king did not force any tax on the public. He received only voluntary gifts called balis, and he also received war spoils. Whereas in the later Veda period, things were different. Position of the king became very important. The society attached some divinity to the king. The king performed various ceremonies like Rajasuya and Ashwamedha to assert his superiority. The strength of the staff of the king was also considerably large. Important officials were, apart from Purohita and Senapati already mentioned, many others including Yuvaraja, the treasurer or Samgrahitri, the tax collector or Bhagadugha, and many others. The territorial administration became a concept, and the word Janapada came to mention it. Rajan had several wings of armies, and in the armies there were weapon-wielding soldiers, there were trained horses, there were well-built chariots, etc. Very often they resorted to prayers for the strength of their armies. Thus we have seen that there are 4 or 5 major differences in the society between the earlier Rig Vedic period and the later Vedic period. Now we come to the 4th component here, social life in Vedic period. In the Vedic period, there were 2 kinds of economy. One was cattle-based herding economy. Another was agriculture-based farming economy. Both were prevalent. In early Vedic India, cows were the basis of entire economy in the sense that a man's wealth was measured in the number of cows he owned. The money system, as prevalent today, was not there in those days. The word for war was Gavishti, or searching for cows. There was the agrarian economy. It was based more on the growth of grains like wheat and rice, and this activity was dependent upon the monsoons and upon the rivers that were there in the Indian subcontinent. Both cows and rivers were very important for their economy, and therefore they were even worshipped. Even today, Go Puja and Nadi Puja continue in our civilization and culture. They have survived from the Vedic period to this day. This is a testament to their importance to the Vedic people, namely the ancestors of modern Indian culture. Varieties of grains were cultivated during the Vedic period, and the literature, even the Samhita literature, which is considered as the most important and oldest part of Vedic literature, mentions a lot of grains. First, Vrihi and Tandula, which corresponds to paddy and rice, has been mentioned very often. Then Masha, the black gram, Tila, the sesame oil seed, Mudga, the green gram, Godhuma, the wheat, Yava, the barley, and apart from these, many other varieties of grains like Khalva, Masura, Priyangu, Anu, Shyamaka, Nivara have all been mentioned often. Social life in the Vedic period can be judged from the list of professionals that have been mentioned in the Vedic literature, this again in Samhitas and Brahmanas. We have references to carpenters, potters, blacksmiths, goldsmiths, gem specialists, hunters, astronomers or stargazers, drivers or charioteers, dancer, singer, musician, fisherman, merchant, and even surgeons are mentioned very often. And there were other professionals like elephant rearer, shepherd, weapon manufacturer, conch blower, gardener, watchman, calculation expert. I will say a little more about the calculation expert called Ganaka in the Vedic literature. In those days, foreign countries were hiring Indians for making ordinary business calculations involving addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, etc. Indians excelled in those calculations in the Vedic period, and foreign countries demanded them, they invited them, and they made use of them. There was an intimate connection between the two classes, namely the priests and the chieftains. The priests performed the ceremonies that confirmed the rule of the Raja, and the priests granted the ruler status and closeness to the gods for these Rajans. On the other hand, reciprocally, the Raja supported the priests and he gave them wealth, influence, and the stability necessary to support an elaborate religious hierarchy. In this manner, both these classes supported mutually. In fact, all the four compartments of society were harmoniously interlinked, each receiving its importance and recognition in its own way, and none of these four can be dispensed with. Now we move on to the fifth part: family, household, and lifestyle. Family was referred to sometime as Kula. Clan reputation was important. This means one's reputation is based on the family that he comes from. In the families, always the head was the oldest male member of the family. He was called Grihapati, and there is reference to Grihapati very often. What about the woman in the family? Even though they cannot lead the family, woman was held in high respect and status in the family, and none of these performances of yajnas can happen without her. A person who has lost his woman becomes ineligible to participate in Vedic rituals. The families were all big and joint families. They were big because they included several generations, parents, sons and daughters, and grandsons and granddaughters, and even the slaves of the family formed a part of the family. In this way, the families were very big. On the other hand, they were joint families. For example, to say a nephew, a cousin, a brother, in Vedic language, there is a single word to denote all of them, and this gives a linguistic clue that all of them were living together in a single big joint family. Next, about the lifestyle. What were their pastimes, habits, etc.? They were interested in music, dance, gambling, chariot racing, and drinks. They were so much interested in music that several musical instruments have been mentioned in Vedas. There is one passage about a string instrument of music similar to veena, but seems to be more sophisticated than veena. Vana shatatantur bhavati is the passage there. It means with 100 strings, the vadya, the musical instrument, is called vana. Veena has been referred to several times. Veena vadam ganakam Kitaya is a passage in Taittiriya Brahmana. Dundubhi is mentioned. Conch or Shankha is mentioned as a musical instrument. Next to music comes dance. There were dancers. Dancing itself was a recognized profession. The dancing ladies were treated highly. Then there were gamblers. In fact, the entire society seems to have participated in gambling. In Rig Veda, there is a passage which describes gambling vividly. It is called Dyuta. Then after gambling, they were having entertainment through drinks. Some drinks were even intoxicating drinks. For example, Soma and Sura. Yet Somapanagam Surapanam. Somapanam and Surapanam are mentioned very frequently. They were intoxicating drinks. But other drinks were more common. The dairy products prepared from milk and curd and cheese and other things, along with a very important, very frequently mentioned drink is honey, madhu. Ghritancha vai madhucha comes again and again. Ghee and honey were important items of their food. Now we pass on to the sixth item, the class system, the caste system in Vedic period. There was a pyramid. There were 5 layers in the pyramid. They were named as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra and Chandala. And the very word for this class system in Sanskrit is the word Varna. But one very easily finds that the same word is used for color also. Therefore, there is a theory that this class division was based on the color of the skin. But actually, it was not so. In each of the classes, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, there have been persons whose skins were of different hues. Brahmins formed the priestly caste. Kshatriyas formed the warrior caste or noble caste. The Vaishyas formed the caste of farmers and businessmen. And Shudras were a caste containing servants and other workers. Chandala is not so often used in the Samhita portions, but it comes in the Brahmana portions. It was believed that In God's gigantic body, these castes emerged from. The Vedic passage says that from the Mukha face of God, Virat Purusha, Brahmanas appeared. From the shoulders of the God, Kshatriyas appeared. From the thighs of Virat Purusha, Vaishyas appeared. And from the legs of this Virat Purusha, Shudras appeared. And this passage is there in Purusha Sukta, which is a part of all the four Vedas. Next, we will see a few details about the religion in Vedic society. Vedic religion was mostly based on performance of sacrifices. In those days, there were not many temples built. More importance was attached to the sacrifices performed. The god Purusha himself made a primordial sacrifice, and with that as an example, the entire Vedic religion was based on sacrifices. Because of that, two gods, Soma and Agni, became most important in the Vedic pantheon, because these two are directly related to the sacrifices. Agni was the god of the sacrificial fire. Soma was the god of the sacred drink and also the moon. We continue more about Vedic gods and religion. Most important among the Vedic gods are Indra, Agni, Rudra, Soma. Vedic society had a deep knowledge of certain aspects of nature, such as rain, mountains, rivers, seas, and also about celestial bodies like the sun and moon. Because of this, they were fascinated with the natural phenomena, and this led them to gather that the nature was not unplanned, it was not unregulated, there was no disorder. Everything falls in an order. That order is called cosmos, and the Vedic word for the cosmic order is the word Ritam. This cosmos was divided into three segments: Prithvi, Antariksham, Dyauh. Prithvi refers to the earth. Antariksham is the middle realm, the sky where the birds fly. The upper part of the sky is called Dyauh. We have three stages, three parts of the cosmos itself. Vedic gods are plenty. Among them, the important ones are Indra and Maruts, Agni, Rudra, Soma, and Varuna. We will see a little about each one of them. Indra was the most important god in Vedas because the number of passages that talk about Indra are more than for any other god. Indra was the god of rains also. He was wielding a very powerful weapon called Vajra, and he was the god to be worshipped by the armies if they want to conquer their enemies. The entire Swasti Vachana, starting with Ashushishanaha, is a prayer song for Indra to be sung by the armies, to be sung by the soldiers who want to conquer their enemies. There he is described as Gotrabhidam, Govidam, Vajrabahum, Jayantam, and so on. Next to Indra in the Vedic pantheon comes Agni. Agni means literally fire, but here in Vedic literature, Agni refers to all kinds of tejas, starting from the fire of tapas, penance, or the fire of urge that comes in one's body, fire of the feelings, or the fire that destroys the forests, or the fire that is worshipped in everyday life, or the fire that is in the stomach digesting the food. And there are several kinds of fire up to the fire of cremation. All these are coming in the purview of Agni Devata. Agni is so important that the very first mantra of Rig Veda starts with Agni Mile Purohitam. Very first mantra is for Agni, and it has been commentated in very many ways, and Agni is referred to there as Purohita and as Ratna Dhatama. Therefore, it is believed that Agni will offer us wealth. Next, in the line of gods is Soma. Soma refers to many things in Vedic literature. Soma means the moon god. Soma also means a creeper called Soma Lata, which is used in the yagas. Soma Yag also means a kind of yaga, some ritual to be performed. Soma Devata is so important in the Vedic literature that there are plenty of mantras for Soma. Next comes Varuna. Varuna is the god of the night sky. Varuna is sometimes described as a person who has magic spells and who can affect the human society in evil ways also. Varuna wields a weapon called Pasha, and there are prayers to escape from Varuna Pasha. Next comes in the list of gods Rudra. Nowadays, what Itihasa and Puranas have described about Lord Shiva, many of these attributes and qualities are found common in Rudra. But the word Shiva as a god, is not available in the Rig Veda. Rudra comes several times. Rudra is a very fierce, very awesome god, and he is destructive. Whenever a homa or an offer is made for Rudra, it is ordained that one should touch the water immediately. There are also female deities, many of them occurring in Vedic mantras. One of them, for example, is Aditi. There is a mention about Aditi Pasha. Aditihi Pashan Pramumoktu. The goddess of earth, Prithvi, is mentioned very often. Mata, Medini, Mahati, Mahi. These are several synonyms describing the greatness of Prithvi. There were other female deities like Raka, Sinivali, Ushas. Ushas is the god of early morning, that is a lady deity. Raka and Sinivali are gods of new moon, full moon, etc. Sacrifices were important parts of the Vedic civilization, and the patron of sacrifices, the main performer of the sacrifices, was called Yajamana. Yajamana funded the sacrifices. Yajamana hosted the sacrifices, whereas the actual works of the sacrifice were performed by persons called Ritviks. Yajamana can be a Brahmana or Kshatriya, but Ritviks were always Brahmanas. In sacrifices, offerings like ghee, milk, grain, and occasionally meat were put into the fire. Alongside, there was a chanting of sacred hymns from Rigveda, Samaveda, and Yajurveda. These were performed in order to bring health, wealth, sons, and longevity to the Yajamana who is hosting the sacrifices. Now we move on to the next section on polity and social structure in the Vedic civilization. In Rigveda, very often we come across the word wish. That means a fabric of society. And that wish has been divided into several gramas. Gramas seem to be smaller groups located in different places. Family was called Kula, and that was the elementary unit of society. And several families together made one grama. For households, there were several synonyms used. Griha, Gaya, Kshiti, these are several words used to describe households. They may not be synonyms. It is quite possible that there were different kinds of households. Some were called Griha, some others were called Kshiti, and so on. These clans or families had a leader termed as Rajan. Rajan literally means king. But this king did not possess absolute power. He was always counseled, advised by his assembly. In some families, in some clans, there were not kings, there were no rulers, but instead only the council existed. There are two words for the council in Rigveda, Sabha and Samiti. These were probably two kinds of assemblies that influenced the Raja, the king. Not only that they influenced the Raja, they were even instrumental in the selection of the king. They were instrumental in the activities post his accession. Sabha was a smaller assembly. In Sabha, mostly the noble and elite persons will be members, while Samiti was rather a large body. It was comprising of heads of the general families and clans. Apart from Sabha and Samiti, there is a mention of Vidhata. It could be another assembly where the booty from raids and conquests was distributed amongst the family members. They had several goals in life for which they resorted to the performance of sacrifices. Vedas themselves mention many of them. Prosperity, mentioned by the word bhuti kamaha, progeny, praja kamaha, cattle wealth, pashu kamaha, food, anna kamaha, kingdom, grama kamaha, health, jog jivema, divine glow, brahma varchasam, longevity, ayush kamaha, splendor, ruk kamaha, rains, vrishti kamaha, nourishment, pushti kamaha, victory, jayema, eyesight, chakshush kamaha, Vedic eligibility to perform Vedic sacrifices. That itself was a goal. For that itself some other performances, rituals were made. Soma pipasa. Apart from that, Shanti, peace, cleanliness, Shundhantu punantu, sinlessness, apapapmanam, then freedom from obstacles, then money, dhanam, gold, hiranyam, fame, yashas, leadership, expressed by the word vasishthas samananam bhavati, and then greatness, mahan, potency of the sense organs, indriyavi, stability, pratishtha, ability to enjoy the entertainments, annada, then paragati, the paralokas to which after death one goes, that is salokata, then travel capacity, kamacharam, strength, dridhaha, ashithilaha, and these were many of the goals for which these Vedic sacrifices were performed very often. Particularly, sacrifices were designed and devised one each for each goal. If somebody wants prosperity, then there is a separate sacrifice for that. If somebody else wants money, there is a separate sacrifice for that. Next, we move on to the next section about the economy. As already mentioned, the economy was based both on agriculture and cows, the cattle. The importance of the cattle during the Vedic age was underscored by pastoralism, that being of utmost significance in the Vedic civilization. Agriculture was also mainly practiced. We have already mentioned several varieties of grains cultivated. There are several implements, that is tools used in agriculture, such as Khanitra, Shrini, Kulisha, etc. They mean hoe, sickle, axe, etc. Cattle were considered as a symbol of wealth because of their productive nature, and therefore those people fought wars over cows and cattle. There are innumerable references to cows and bulls in the Rig Veda. It suggests the predominance of cattle as wealth in those days. As a symbol of wealth, even land did not qualify. Private land ownership was not important in those days, probably because land was just available. Whereas cattle was qualified as wealth. Even the gifts received by priests and rajans, they were usually cows, sometimes women slaves, dasis, and some purushas, gent slaves. Items such as houses, horses, food, jewels, chariots, children, fertile fields, and fame were also valued. They were included in prayers and sacrifices. Another interesting feature in the Vedic civilization is slavery. Slavery was a common occurrence during the Vedic age. Slaves were treated as property, sometimes sold to others for money or for cattle, cows, etc. The word dasa and dasi were used to address slaves. Those dasas and dasis were not free to do any activity that is production related. They were working for others only. Lastly, we summarize what we have seen so far. Rigveda mantras were in vogue between 7500 BCE and 1000 BCE, whereas different sources claim different dates, mostly within this period and occasionally still earlier also. The Rig Veda was centric around gods and religion and is considered to be of utmost importance, with the purpose for its composition being to recite hymns and prayers to the gods. Rig Veda raises questions about the idea and meaning of Varna and its connotations in the context of the Vedas, as well as dasas and dasyus, the dark-skinned races. Descriptions of family and societal structures. We have seen about polity and politics. We have seen about the aspects of various occupations. We have studied about the economy and the livelihood. These things provide historians with the means to lay a foundation for what we now understand as the Vedic culture. For knowing more about this Vedic culture society, Refer to the text available and also to the list of books given in the bibliography therein. Thank you.